From the cockpit of the Vanguard, our state-of-the-art lunar lander, I watched the terrain scroll past through reinforced windows designed to withstand micrometeorite impacts. The dark side of the moon has always held mysteries, but nothing like what we're about to uncover. Dr. Lena Patel sits to my right, her dark eyes fixed on the sensor readings that have brought us here. The distress beacon signal pulses on her holographic display, a steady rhythm that somehow feels wrong, too regular, too precise. Lieutenant Oscar Reyes, our lunar operations expert, maintains a professional demeanor, but I can see tension in the set of his shoulders. "Signal strength increasing, Captain," Lena reports, her voice steady despite the uncertainty I know she feels. "Whatever's broadcasting, we're getting close." The Vanguard's landing lights cut through the eternal darkness, revealing a landscape that hasn't changed since the birth of our planet. Except, there. Something reflects our lights, something that shouldn't be here. My breath catches as the shape becomes clear. The angular form of a lunar module, its gold foil insulation tattered but still catching our lights like a beacon. "That's impossible," Reyes whispers, leaning forward in his harness. "That's Apollo-era technology." He's right. The module bears the unmistakable design of NASA's golden age, but it's what's written on its side that turns my blood cold. Apollo 20. I've memorized every Apollo mission, studied the program's history extensively. There was no Apollo 20. The American flag still stands beside it, frozen in the airless void, but something about its position seems wrong. It's not planted in the soil, but appears to be leaning away from the module as if trying to escape something. The lunar dust covering everything bears no traces of disturbance, no footprints, no track marks, nothing to suggest recent activity. Yet the distress beacon continues its rhythmic pulse. "Beginning landing sequence," I announce, more to break the oppressive silence than from any procedural necessity. The Vanguard's AI could handle the landing autonomously, but I need the familiar routine of manual control. As we descend, our landing lights illuminate more details of the scene below. The module's legs are partially buried in moon dust, suggesting it's been here for decades. By all rights, it shouldn't be broadcasting anything. Lena's instruments begin to show anomalous readings. "Captain, I'm getting energy signatures that don't match any known power source. And there's something else." She pauses, adjusting her settings. The temperature around the module is several degrees higher than the surrounding area. That's not possible in lunar conditions without an active heat source. The Vanguard settles onto the lunar surface with a gentle touch, kicking up minimal dust. Through the viewports, the Apollo module looms like a monument to forgotten secrets. The distress beacon signal changes pitch slightly, becoming more urgent, as if responding to our presence. "Suit up," I order, unstrapping from my harness. "Whatever this is, we're going to need a closer look." As we prepare for EVA, I can't shake the feeling that we're being watched, not by Houston or Lunar Command, but by something else. Something that's been waiting a very long time for someone to answer its call. The airlock cycles with a hiss that seems too loud in our pressurized suits. Stepping onto the lunar surface, I'm struck by how different it feels from our training simulations. There's a weight to the silence here, a presence in the vacuum that presses against my suit like an invisible hand. Lena and Reyes flank me as we approach the Apollo module, our helmet lights cutting sharp shadows across its weathered surface. Up close, the deterioration is more apparent. Micrometeorite impacts have left countless pinprick holes in the outer shell, yet somehow the structure maintains integrity. "Look at this," Reyes calls out, his light illuminating the base of the module. Strange markings mar the metal near the landing gear, not impact damage or normal wear, but deliberate scratches that form patterns too regular to be random. These look like they were made from the inside out. Lena's handheld scanner chirps continuously as she circles the craft. The energy signature is stronger here. It's pulsing, almost like a heartbeat. Her voice catches. "Captain, according to these readings, the interior is still pressurized." That's when we hear it, a sound that shouldn't be possible in the vacuum of space. Through our suit radios comes a faint scratching, like something moving against metal. The Apollo module's hatch bears signs of forced entry, the seal compromised decades ago, yet Lena's readings suggest an atmosphere within. "Standard entry protocol," I command, trying to keep the tension from my voice. "Reyes, you're on point. Dr. Patel, maintain constant readings. I'll take rear guard." The hatch opens with surprising ease, swinging outward on well-preserved hinges. Our lights reveal an interior that defies explanation. The walls are covered in writing, equations, diagrams, and warnings scrawled in what looks like blood mixed with lunar dust. The writing spans multiple languages, some of which I don't recognize. "They were never meant to be found," Reyes reads aloud, his light lingering on one particularly clear message. "Technology, not of this world." The interior space is cramped, designed for a different era of space exploration. Against one wall we find them, 3 figures in Apollo-era spacesuits, perfectly preserved in the airless environment. Their helmets bear impact damage from within, as if something had tried to break out rather than in. Lena moves to examine a logbook floating near one of the figures, her hands shaking slightly as she grasps it. "Captain, these entries. The last one is dated July 1975. She begins reading. "Day 37. The artifact responds to human presence. It shows us things, visions. The others are changing. Mission parameters abandoned. We cannot let them take it back to Earth. They're watching us now. Always watching." The scratching sound comes again, louder this time, accompanied by a faint luminescence that seems to emanate from the walls themselves. Our suit temperature gauges begin to fluctuate wildly, and for a moment, I swear I see movement reflected in the faceplate of one of the dead astronauts. A shifting, otherworldly pattern that disappears when I try to focus on it. "We need to document everything," I say, forcing myself to remain professional despite the growing dread in my gut. "Reyes, set up the imaging equipment. Dr. Patel, collect any data storage devices you can find. We need to understand what happened here." As we work, the sensation of being watched intensifies. The shadows in the corners of the module seem to deepen, and the scratching sound becomes a constant background presence in our comms. Whatever secrets this mission held, whatever drove these men to their deaths, it's still here, waiting to be uncovered. The video feed from Earth flickers with static, but Director Rhodes's face is clear enough to see the controlled tension in his expression. We've set up the secure communication link in the Vanguard's command module, the Apollo 20 visible through the viewport behind us, like an accusing finger pointing at NASA's secrets. "Director," I begin, keeping my voice steady. "We found evidence of an unauthorized Apollo mission from 1975. 3 deceased crew members, extensive documentation, and references to some kind of artifact. I need to know what we're dealing with here." Rhodes' face remains impassive, but I notice the slight twitch in his left eye. Behind him, shadowy figures move in and out of the camera's frame, military personnel based on their bearing. One man in particular, a general whose insignia I can't quite make out, seems to be paying especially close attention. "Captain Monroe," Rhodes responds, his voice carefully modulated. "There was no Apollo 20 mission. The program ended with Apollo 17. Whatever you found must be..." He pauses, choosing his words. "Must be some sort of mistake." Beside me, Lena bristles. "With all due respect, Director," she interrupts, holding up the logbook we recovered. "I'm holding physical evidence that says otherwise. These logs are authentic NASA documentation. The signatures, the materials, everything checks out." I watch as Rhodes's calm facade cracks slightly. The general behind him steps forward, whispering something in his ear. The feed distorts for a moment, and when it clears, Rhodes's expression has hardened. "Dr. Patel," he says, "what you're holding is classified material. You are to secure all items found at the site and await further instructions. Do not attempt to access any technology you may find. Do not attempt to decode any messages. That's an order." The temperature in our command module seems to drop several degrees. Reyes, who has been quietly monitoring our systems, suddenly straightens. "Sir," he says, addressing me rather than Rhodes, "I'm picking up unusual energy readings. They're similar to what we detected from the Apollo module, but stronger." Through the viewport, I notice something that makes my heart skip. The American flag near the Apollo module is moving. There's no wind on the moon, no atmosphere, no way for that flag to be rippling like that. "Director," I say, cutting through the tension, "we found references to an artifact, something that affected the Apollo crew. What exactly are we dealing with here?" The general steps fully into frame now, his face filling the screen. "Captain Monroe, this communication is terminated. Maintain your position and await extraction. Do not, I repeat, do not attempt to locate the artifact. That's a direct order from Space Command." The feed cuts out abruptly, leaving us in silence. Through the viewport, the flag has stopped moving, but now I can see something else. Shadows moving across the lunar surface where no shadows should be. "They knew," Lena whispers, her face pale in the module's harsh lighting. "They sent those men up here knowing something was waiting for them." Reyes's console begins emitting a high-pitched tone. "Captain, those energy readings? They're coming from below the surface now, about 30 meters down in a crevice near the Apollo landing site." I make a decision that I know will change everything. "Suit up. If they're sending an extraction team, we need to find out what's down there before they arrive. Whatever happened to Apollo 20's crew, whatever they found, we might be the only ones left who can expose the truth." As we prepare for EVA, I catch my reflection in the module's window. For a moment, just a moment, I swear my eyes aren't my own. Something else looks back at me from the glass, something ancient and patient and hungry. The crevice yawns before us like a mouth in the moon's ancient face. Our helmet lights illuminate the first few meters of the descent, but beyond that, the darkness seems to swallow our beams entirely. Lena's scanner shows the rough path down, but the readings keep glitching, numbers and symbols flickering into unknown configurations before resetting. "The Apollo crew left anchors," Reyes points out, his light catching the glint of metal spikes driven into the rock. "They're heavily corroded, but the pattern is deliberate, a path leading down into the darkness. We begin our descent, the reduced lunar gravity making the climb easier but somehow more unsettling. Each movement feels wrong, as if we're being guided down by something other than physics. The walls of the crevice are smooth in places where they should be rough, with patterns that look almost like writing but shift when viewed directly. Energy readings are off the scale," Lena reports, her voice tight with tension. "The signature matches what we found in the module, but it's like it's alive somehow, responding to our presence." 20 meters down, we find the first evidence of the Apollo crew's expedition. A drop tool, frozen in the vacuum, its metal surface carved with the same strange patterns we saw in the module. Reyes reaches for it, but I stop him. "Look at the metal around those markings," I say, pointing with my light. The tool's surface appears to be slowly flowing like mercury, the patterns reorganizing themselves as we watch. Another 10 meters down, the crevice widens into a small chamber. Our lights reveal what we've been seeking, and the sight stops us cold. The artifact sits on a natural pedestal of lunar rock, but sits isn't quite right. It hovers a few centimeters above the surface, rotating slowly. It's a perfect black that seems to drink in our lights, its surface smooth yet somehow textured with patterns that hurt to look at directly. "This isn't possible," Lena breathes, her scanner going haywire. "The mass readings. It's like it's both here and not here at the same time. And these energy patterns, they don't match anything in our database." As we approach, the artifact responds. A faint hum builds in our helmets, not transmitted through the vacuum, but somehow directly into our minds. The surface of the object begins to ripple, and for a moment, I see reflections in its surface, not of us in our modern suits, but of the Apollo crew, their final moments played out in fragments of light and shadow. Reyes steps forward, hand outstretched. "It's beautiful," he whispers, his voice taking on a quality I don't like. Before I can stop him, his gloved finger makes contact with the artifact's surface. The effect is immediate and terrifying. The hum becomes a scream that threatens to shatter our helmets. The artifact's surface erupts with light that moves in impossible ways, casting shadows that crawl across the walls like living things. In those shadows I see shapes, forms that have no place in human geometry, entities that exist in more dimensions than our minds can process. "Break contact," I shout, pulling Reyes back. But it's too late. Where his finger touched the artifact, his suit's material has changed, becoming something else, something that spreads slowly across his glove, like a living metal. "Captain," Lena says, her voice shaking, "the signal. The artifact is broadcasting something, not just the distress beacon we followed. It's sending out a message and..." She swallows hard. Something is answering. The climb back to the surface is a blur of mounting dread and increasing system failures. Reyes' suit continues to transform, the strange metallic growth having spread halfway up his arm. His vital signs fluctuate wildly on my HUD, but he remains eerily calm, whispering equations and coordinates that make no mathematical sense. As we emerge from the crevice, the lunar landscape has changed. The endless starfield above us seems wrong somehow. Constellations shift and reform in patterns that shouldn't be possible. The Apollo module casts shadows in multiple directions, despite there being only one light source. "Multiple contacts," Lena announces, her voice tight. 3 vessels approaching from Earth orbit, military grade, running dark. She checks her instruments again and frowns. "Captain, their trajectories. They're not following normal space-time curves. They're using some kind of advanced propulsion we've never seen before. The first vessel touches down less than a kilometer from our position, its design unlike anything in our database. It's angular, predatory, with surfaces that seem to absorb rather than reflect light. The hatch opens with a hiss of escaping atmosphere and figures emerge. Soldiers in advanced pressure suits that make our own look primitive. "This is General Marcus Holt," a voice cuts through our comms, overriding our encryption. "Captain Monroe, your team is in violation of multiple classified directives. Stand down and prepare for immediate extraction." The soldiers move with practiced precision, encircling our position. Their weapons look like standard railguns, but something about their design seems off, as if they've been modified with technology we don't understand. "They're here for the artifact," Lena whispers on our private channel. "Look at their equipment. They've seen this kind of thing before. They know what it does." Reyes suddenly straightens, his transformed arm rising toward the sky. "They're coming," he says, his voice overlaid with harmonic frequencies that shouldn't be possible through our comm system. The Brothers of Light have heard the beacon's song. General Holt approaches, his suit's design allowing for more fluid movement than ours. "The artifact, Captain. Now this is beyond your clearance, beyond your understanding. We've been monitoring these sites for decades, containing what we find. Don't make this difficult." I step forward, positioning myself between his team and the crevice entrance. "You knew about Apollo 20, I accuse. You sent those men up here to die. How many other missions have you covered up? How many other crews have you sacrificed?" Holt's faceplate polarizes, hiding his expression, but his voice carries a weight of terrible knowledge. "You have no idea what's at stake, what's been waiting up here, patient and hungry, since before your ancestors crawled out of the seas. The artifact is just one piece of a larger puzzle, a puzzle that humanity isn't ready to solve." The confrontation is interrupted by an impossible sound, a deep, resonant tone that seems to vibrate through the lunar crust itself. The dust at our feet begins to move in patterns that defy gravity, forming complex geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly. Reyes collapses to his knees, the transformation having reached his shoulder. Through his faceplate, I can see his eyes. They're changing, becoming something that reflects light in ways human eyes shouldn't. "They're here," he says again, but his voice has changed, becoming a chorus of overlapping frequencies. The Watchers, the Guardians, the ones who slumber in the dark between stars. The Apollo module's surface ripples like water, and figures step through the solid metal, the original crew, but wrong somehow. Their vintage suits are pristine yet twisted, merged with something else, something that moves beneath the fabric like living mercury. Their faceplates are cracked, but instead of vacuum-preserved corpses, their faces are masks of shifting light and shadow. "Jesus Christ," one of Holt's soldiers whispers, taking an involuntary step back. The general himself remains stoic, but I notice his hand tightening on his weapon. "You've done it now," Holt says, his voice tight with controlled fear. "You've awakened them, just like in 75. We thought we contained it then, sealed it away in the dark where it belonged. But you just had to dig, had to know." Lena's scanner emits a high-pitched whine before exploding in a shower of sparks. "The energy readings," she gasps. "They're everywhere. Reality itself is starting to break down at the quantum level." The phantom astronauts move toward us with a fluid grace that suggests they're not bound by normal physics. Their footprints in the dust glow with an inner light, and where they pass, the lunar surface seems to ripple and flow like liquid glass. "We tried to warn you," they speak in unison, their voices carrying through the vacuum in ways that violate every law of physics. The artifact is not a thing to be claimed. It is a key, a doorway, and now it has called to its makers. The stars above us are moving now, forming new constellations that pulse with meaning, a language written in stellar fire that speaks of things our minds cannot comprehend. The transformation spreading across Reyes's suit has begun to emit its own light, patterns flowing across its surface that match the ones in the sky. The lunar surface has become a nightmare landscape of shifting shadows and impossible geometries. The phantom astronauts surround us now, their forms flickering between human shapes and something else, geometrical patterns that exist in more dimensions than our minds can process. Through Reyes's transformed arm, the artifact's influence spreads across the ground like living mercury. "You don't understand what you've done," Holt shouts, his composure finally cracking. This site was contained, dormant. The artifact was never meant to be touched again. We had an arrangement. An arrangement? One of the phantom astronauts steps forward. I recognize him from old NASA photos as the Apollo 20 commander, though his face now ripples with impossible colors. "Tell them, General, tell them about the pact NASA made, about the price of reaching the stars." Lena's voice shakes as she speaks, her scientific mind struggling to process what she's seeing. "The moon landings. They weren't just about beating the Soviets, were they? You found something during Apollo 11, something that changed everything." The Phantom Commander laughs, the sound reverberating through our helmets in harmonics that make my teeth ache. "They found us. Or rather, they found what we left behind. A test to see if your species was ready. Apollo 11 stumbled upon one of our markers. By Apollo 17, your leaders had made their choice." The truth hits me like a physical blow. "The space race ended because of this. You shut everything down because you were afraid of what else you might find." "Afraid?" Holt's laugh is bitter. "We were terrified, but we didn't shut it down. We just took it underground. Black Ops missions, classified beyond top secret. Apollo 20 was supposed to be different. They thought they could control it, harness what they found here. Instead..." Reyes suddenly stands, his movements jerky and wrong. The transformation has reached his helmet now, the material flowing like liquid metal. Through his faceplate, I see his eyes have become pools of swirling darkness that reflect the moving stars above. "The gateway opens," he speaks, but it's not his voice anymore. It's something ancient and vast, speaking through him. The long watch ends. They come to claim what is theirs. The surface of the moon trembles, and in the distance something vast begins to rise from beneath the lunar regolith. It's like a city, but wrong. Towers of non-Euclidean geometry that stretch up toward the stars, built from a material that seems to exist partially in another dimension. The city rises like a twisted reflection of human architecture, its spires reaching into space in ways that deny physics and sanity. The artifact pulses in response, its surface now a window into dimensions that human minds were never meant to perceive. Through it, I see them, the beings that have been waiting, watching humanity's fumbling steps into space. They're beautiful and terrible, existing in geometries that make my mind scream. Their forms shift and flow, sometimes appearing almost human-like before spiraling into patterns that suggest the infinite complexity of fractal mathematics given consciousness. "This was their plan all along," Holt whispers, his military bearing crumbling in the face of cosmic horror. Every mission, every discovery, how we were being led here, the artifacts, the phantoms, the technology we thought we could control, it was all a path to this moment. Lena grabs my arm, her grip desperate. The equations in the Apollo module, the patterns, they weren't warnings. They were a key. We weren't meant to find them. We were meant to solve them. Every space program on Earth, all working separately, but arriving at the same conclusions. The phantom astronauts begin to fade, their forms dissolving into patterns of light that flow toward the rising city. The transformed matter spreading from Reyes pulses in sync with the artifact, creating a bridge of living metal that stretches toward the impossible architecture. Your species stands at a crossroads, the voice speaks through Reyes, his body now more alien than human. The price of reaching the stars was always transformation. Those who came before us paid it. Now it is your turn. Above us, the stars continue their impossible dance, and I realize with horror that they're not just moving, they're approaching. What we thought was empty space between them is filling with shapes that defy comprehension, a vast armada of beings that have been waiting in plain sight, disguised as the very cosmic phenomena we studied. Captain, Lena's voice breaks through my terror. The readings, the entire moon is resonating with the same energy as the artifact. It's not just a base or an outpost. The whole thing is artificial, a construct created to watch us, guide us, and now you understand, the voice echoes through all our comms. Your moon was never a natural satellite. It is a door, and you have just turned the key. The military vessels that brought Holt and his team begin to lift off, their engines screaming as they attempt to escape. But the very fabric of space seems to twist around them, folding them into geometries that shouldn't exist before they vanish completely. Make your choice, the voice commands as Reyes's form begins to dissolve into patterns of light that flow toward the city. Embrace transformation or retreat to your cradle. But know this, you have been seen, you have been measured, and you can never again pretend you are alone in the cosmos. The artifact pulses one final time and I feel something change in my own suit, in my own flesh. The patterns are spreading, transforming us all. In my last moments of human consciousness, I understand the true horror. Not that we discovered something alien on the moon, but that we ourselves were the aliens all along, shaped and guided by beings who saw our planet as nothing more than a petri dish in their vast cosmic laboratory. My final transmission to Earth is brief. We were never meant to save humanity. We were meant to become something else entirely. The dark side of the moon holds its secrets no longer, and humanity's place in the universe will never be the same.